Q&A where we answer your questions about hitting. So do me a favor. If you are just tuning in right now, let me know where you're tuning in from. Last week we had people from New Zealand, Australia, Costa Rica, Canada, France. And I'll tell you what, for me as a coach, it's really fun to see your guys' comments pouring in, to see where you're tuning in from. All over the country, all over the world. It's really fun. I'm really excited today because my special guest is Callix Crabbe, the assistant hitting coach for the Texas Rangers. Callix, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Very excited to sit down and talk baseball.
Awesome. I appreciate you being on here. And so today, if you've tuned into the show before, you know this is Q&A, and we are trying to help hitters and parents and coaches the best we can with your questions about hitting across the board. It could be anything from little league stuff to older stuff. We want to help you. So again, thanks for everybody for tuning in. If you are tuning in, if you're tuning in on Facebook or you're on YouTube or Twitter, hit that like button, hit that share button for me. Let me know you are here. We've got people tuning in from Wisconsin this morning. We've got from Clanton, Alabama, someone from Ohio. Russell's tuning in from Santa Rosa. Mark Barron's in Barrington, Illinois. We got another person in northwestern Pennsylvania. So we got all over the country this morning. It's pretty awesome. So get your questions in, and we would love to hear. Now, Callix, as the questions are starting to come in, tell me a little bit about, spring training's coming up, and there's still some time about what's going on, but for you right now, getting ready for spring training, I know some family time's going on, but from a hitting standpoint, tell me a little bit about, if you're a minor league or major league player and you're 2 weeks away from reporting or around that time, what are those guys doing to get ready?
So I have a good group up here in Tampa. The younger minor league group, their season's probably going to start a little bit later, but big league guys are obviously finishing the final touches on any adjustments that they've tried to make from the previous year's successes or failures. So you're looking at starting to see some velocity, starting to get a little bit of spin, starting to get some spin data into your game, making sure that when you show up to spring training, you don't have a whole lot of time once you start playing games. So it's important for you to get that that database built up as best as you can, so that you can quickly jump out the gate and give yourself a chance to make a team if you need to make the team. And those guys are obviously in better positions. They're just going to kind of like ease their ways into it. But generally speaking, you should start seeing a little bit of overhand, a little bit of live at bat, see some spin, and then kind of build into spring training like that.
Yeah, they're ramping up to get ready for some getting live here quick, right? So pretty awesome right here. We've got Michael's tuning in from Santa Clara, California. We got someone in warm Palm Springs. Hagen's out in Colorado. Joe's in Temple, Texas. And so our first question this morning comes from Matt Martinez, and his question is, how can you increase hand speed? So that's an interesting question. We talk a lot about bat speed, exit velocity, talking about hand speed. Callix, you got anything on there? Do you ever come across that question?
Yeah, so I have. I think first and foremost, let me explain that hand speed obviously isn't the only important thing in hitting. Hand speed and bat speed obviously it's a little bit different. But I have a system that I've used. It's called a power-up system, and there's the super speed slugger sticks. I've had some success with some younger kids that I put onto that program. We did a 6-week program, and what we did was we kind of tracked their data using blast motion. And then after a couple of weeks, we started to see some improvements in just pure hand speed and bat speed. But I would say to you, I would focus on an overload underload type program. I think that'd be quite helpful in creating hand speed. But also, let's not forget that the ground is your friend, right? So if you can do a little bit better job, work on some vertical jumping, work on some lateral bounds, anything that's going to help you create a little bit of acceleration and deceleration, we know that kinematically speaking, the hands will increase if there's good functional movement from the ground into the hips. So I would say a combination of those things would be beneficial.
That's great. The next question comes from Mike. He says, questions you should ask a new hitting coach on your first lesson. That's a great question, Mike. For me, if it's my kid and I was bringing him to a new hitting coach, I guess I would want to know a little bit about their process. How do they go about their things? Is just, are they just throwing drills at them, or, do they get to know them a little bit? Like what tools do they use? For me, I would kind of want to know, what is their long-term plan with my son? Is it just, again, sitting on the bucket and feeding the tees? I would try to learn as much as I can about that hitting coach and their philosophy a little bit, as much as you can in a short, little conversation. But for me, I want to know kind of what, how they approach working with hitters. Anything you want to add to that one?
Yeah, I would love to add quickly. I would say the first thing I would ask that hitting coach is are you gonna try to accentuate what I do well? Oftentimes, hitting coaches really focus on some of the negatives that hitters might have in their swings. When the reality is those negatives, aren't they might not be negatives. Maybe a player, when 4 or 5 years old, they started learning to make a particular move around their system, and maybe that's what's going to allow them to be successful. The second thing I would say is I would ask that hitting coach if they're going to be really focused on my child enjoying these experiences. And now I understand that you're paying for a lesson, and oftentimes you don't want to kind of like a parent don't think of fun associated with they're paying extreme amounts of dollars. But I would say we need to make sure that coach has a pretty diverse understanding of work and play, because we don't want our kids to quit the game before they actually start to develop their real technical skills. They need to develop that love, that emotional, passion for the game, that happy state before anything. And then I would just say, lastly, and you kind of alluded to this already, Matt, is making sure that they have a plan that they can put in place for him, right? Like, or her. Making sure that it's not just going to be the same type of work every day. There's going to be progressions. We're going to focus on, building, bat to ball skills. We're going to focus on some technical skills. Are we going to improve the swing? We're going to focus on some neurological training, some quick reactions. There needs to be a really well put together apparatus so that a player can develop and flourish, not just in one compartment, but in multiple.
Yeah, that's great. And I would just say, again, like, parents got to understand that for most kids, like, that lesson can be sometimes intimidating. They could be a little bit shy. So you want to make sure that coach is going to have some fun too, because you don't want the kid dreading you dragging them to that hitting lesson each week. That's not fun for the coach. It's not fun for the kid. So, hey, again, if you're just tuning in right now, my special guest is Callix Crabbe. He's the assistant hitting coach for the Texas Rangers, and we are answering your questions live on our Q&A with the Hitting Vault. .com. So thank you guys so much. If you're just tuning in, hit that like button, hit the share button, and let me know where you're tuning in from. Again, we got people all over the country today. Matt's in New Mexico. We got Kai in Santa Rosa. We got another person in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Even Michael Valorizo says, "Nice work having Callix on. I scouted him in Georgia."
Michael, yeah.
So it's good to see a lot of great guys on here. So. Let's see. Here's a question from Kyle Norman. He says, "Do you like to use the machine, and how often?" So I'll start off. I'll tell you, I love the machine. I'll tell you, maybe 5-10 years ago, I didn't use it very much. I'll own that. I did not use it as much, and I will say nowadays, man, I use it every day. Some of my pro guys right now, I mean, I can tell you one of my pro guys right now, he really barely some little front toss, a little tee to get warmed up, and then his entire time is on that machine, going hard, from off speed to fastballs, everything. So I love the ability to create game-like speed and spins and things like that from the machine. I'll tell you, one of the funnest things I did when I first got to the University of Missouri baseball, we have all this data from the TrackMan. We had every SEC pitcher, and I took the pitching machine, three-wheel Rawlings machine, out to the game mound with TrackMan, and we tried to create every SEC pitcher from the machine. And then we brought it back to the cages, and we had different dials for different pitchers. So I'm a big fan of it. I think it does a lot of game stuff. But I can tell you, when I got to the Chicago White Sox and the minor league guys, there were a lot of guys who said, "I don't hit off the machine," or "I don't like the machine." Kind of some type of combo of that. And it was hard to have some conversation because you got a lot of college and pro guys who aren't used to it. They don't like it. What do you think, Callix? What do you think about the machine?
So, I'm a believer in it, but I believe that there's two sides to it. I think emotionally speaking, you need to, get with the player at the right stage. There's some guys that don't like getting, embarrassed right before the game. And so there's that part of it. I believe that creating game-like environments is a very beneficial thing. And there's a flip side to it too. I think oftentimes with the machine, a hitter, if you only focus on high extreme velocity, the hitters might speed up. And so I think at times you can focus on long machines. So you can take that machine and put it behind the mound, past 60, 65 feet. and you can create these slow balls coming in, so we can develop a little bit of cadence and rhythm and adjustability into your game. So I think, there's an element, there's a component that should be about creating, a quick neurological response to game-like environment. And then the other side of it is creating the ability to slow down and learn how to time and create a little bit of stability into the swing. So to answer the question, I definitely believe the machine is beneficial. I don't think that every single player needs it the exact same way. I believe that there's some that, it can speed them up too much, and there's some that need to work on slowing it down. So definitely believe in it. I think you just need to make sure you do it individual.
Yeah, and the best part about coaching is that relationship where you start learning. Some guys need that; they need that feel good, and they don't want to get owned by the machine. And you got to figure out that balance of.
But you need to challenge. You need to be challenged, though. Definitely,
Yes.
there's a component to it. Again, the timing of it is important.
Absolutely. All right, so we've got people. I just love seeing, like, we've got Brian in Snowy, New Jersey. We got Brenda's in New Jersey, Allison's in Abilene, Texas, Brian's in Iowa, Zach's in Madison, Wisconsin, Jacqueline is in Huntsville, Texas, Steve in Oklahoma. We don't have. I don't see any internationals this week so far yet. So if you're tuning in from overseas, I want to hear from you, because I love seeing some of those overseas. So the next question we've got for you comes from Kyle again. He says, do you have any absolutes in the swing that you think are musts? And I know the word absolute sometimes is scary in itself with hitting, but is there anything in your mind that you kind of stick out as an absolute when it comes to the swing?
I don't love the word absolutes. I think that, everyone's physical capabilities, they're all different. They have different experiences. There's some hitters who do a great job of feeling the ground. There's others that you might not do so much. There's some hitters that need to think about, I hate saying it, but think about swinging down, as long as they're creating the correct movements to it. But I definitely believe that a good load, how you gather, is a very, very important thing. I think when you look at the best hitters in the world, swaying is a bad thing in a batter's box. It doesn't allow you to create, good dynamic balance. It doesn't allow you to move in space correctly. So I would say an absolute would be making sure you gather with stability in the rear hip. I don't believe in just holding on to the rear hip as you stride out to the baseball. I think I think we have a better understanding now of, pressure, vertical pressure and horizontal pressures into the swing. There's some people who are, right leg dominant versus left leg dominant. So you'll start to see certain tendencies. I would say I definitely like seeing negative of absolutes. I like seeing negative vertical angle at impact. I think there's, when you look at the best hitters in the world, that's something that you see. Again, whether they're thinking about it or not, that's not the conversation. As long as it shows up into the swing, I think they're swinging from the inside. They're hitting the proper part of the baseball, and they're going to be able to carry through the zone. So, without getting long-winded, I can tell you my whole personal philosophy, but I would say making sure that we gather correctly, making sure that impact is stable, and have some negative tilt, and then, making sure that you actually don't aggressively swing down to the ball.
Yeah, that's great. And for me, I would tell you, 10 years ago, again, there was probably a list of absolutes that I thought was, but I think there are some absolutes for each individual hitter and how they improve. But I think, to me, at the end of the day, again, exactly like Callix is saying, but the only things for me, the absolutes, you got to be on time. And I do believe, again, just like he said, I think your attack angle and your vertical bat angle does have to be negative, at least to 1 degree, in order to really be able to have success in this game. And that's really about it. Here's a good question. I enjoy this question. And the question is, thoughts on coaches telling players where to hit the ball, situational hitting. And again, in pro ball and college ball, sometimes in a team setting, situational hitting. Whereas if you only go to the cages and deal with cage guys, we don't talk a lot about situational hitting that. So, what are your thoughts on situational hitting in general?
Yeah. Well, for one, I think there's, I'm going to steal this quote from Michael Young. Michael Young, the great, really good hitter with the Rangers. Good friend of mine, talk with him, love hearing his thoughts. So there's creating offense, and then there's swinging. Creating offense is what allows you to score runs. And with the Rangers, we have this mantra, pass the baton. Essentially means do what the game is asking you to do to help your teammates become superstars. And obviously, there's components. There's getting hits. There's moving a runner at the right times, making sure that you understand leverage and non-leverage situations. When you're in a position where there might be a runner in a second base, and those first two pitches are yours. Well, at some point, if you get to an 0-2 count, or you're in a negative situation, you need to do the very best that you can to make sure that some type of positive outcome happens for the team. And it might not mean you getting a hit. So I think situational hitting is extremely important. I think it's going to start to come back in the game of baseball. I'm not saying to you that on the first pitch you should be thinking about just moving the runner over. I think you definitely have a pitch that's yours, and you should focus on doing some type of damage, sending off an A swing, getting on time, and sending off a good confident swing. So I definitely believe that there's an element of practicing this as well. As much as I love being a hitting coach and love talking about the swing, some of the best hitters, best offensive creators didn't always have the greatest swings, but they knew the job done. And Michael Young comes to mind. So not to use his name or name drop, but I definitely believe that situational hitting, you should work on it. I think it's not the only thing. You shouldn't be focused on that all day long, but there should be a time and a place for you to work on scenarios for sure.
Yeah. No, that's great. And I would say, if you're a high school coach or a coach and you're trying to do some situational hitting rounds in BP, again, like if I'm saying, hey, I want everyone to go opposite field, I don't want to be throwing jam shots in on their hands and trying to get them to do that too. So there's some nuance to situational hitting, but you also, there's, and you said it perfectly. There's a big difference between hitting and swinging, and knowing the difference between that is, and I think it's difficult in this time of Twitter and cages and all the people that are working out there, that when you go to see lesson guys who have not been on the field very much, understanding that those guys are teaching you how to swing, and that's great. But understand there's also this element of hitting, that we got to score runs and we got to be situational, we got to have barrel control, and it's not just swinging all the time. There's some nuance to that. Okay. The next question comes from Jamie. She says, how can we teach that controlled falling forward in your stride versus reaching with their stride foot? I find my kids will have a great load and then just reach with their stride foot. So I'll start. I'll tell you, Jamie, in my experience, and Callix kind of touched on it a little bit, a lot of times when you have a hitter that sways in their load, they sway and they get over their back leg. When your weight gets over your back leg, in order to go forward, you have to push or reach. You've got to do something to get there. And so we don't want our hitters to reach. We don't want them to do what you're talking about, reaching, and we don't want them to push off that back foot. Again, if I'm a high school or college pitcher and I see a hitter that does that, sways and then pushes, I'm throwing them changeups all day, changing speeds on them. It's harder to control. So what we really want to happen is, and it's kind of what Callix was talking about in that absolutes, you got to have a good load. And that good load is talking about getting into your backside without getting over it. And it has to do with more of, getting some internal rotation in my hips and getting your weight into your backside versus my hips, and kind of dropping my hands here, swaying back. And to me, the biggest problem that I see with hitters that reach or push in their stride is that they sway and they get over their backside. So, see what your hitters do. Film them from the side. Kind of watch their head too. If their head goes back in their load, that's probably another sign that they're swaying and they're getting over their backside. Anything else that you'd add, Callix, on how to teach hitters to not reach?
So I would say, I think there's two parts to it. I think we need to try to understand why it might be happening, Coach. I think the sway is a byproduct of something. It could be instability. It could be lack of connection with the ground. It could be lack of ankle mobility, the ability to create a little bit of eversion. So maybe some adjustments might be opening up the rear leg or skimming the rear foot a little bit more, so they can be better force acceptance into that back foot and create a little bit of internal rotation for them naturally. I think you're right on point. I think, Coach, what you should do is find a way for you to get someone in a gym who can help you assess that player, and you can better understand why you're seeing certain things are taking place. The other thing I would say is try to help them with the feels that they need. Feel is extremely important. And oftentimes, if a player has never gotten the right cueing, the right feel cues, then they can't really do it. So I would say figure out here's some options. Get some foam golf balls, cut them in half, and ask that hitter to put it at the bottom of the inside of their back foot and apply pressure on the middle side of their back foot. I would say do some band drills with them, right? So you have to create some constraints, right? If you want them to stop doing it, you have to try. You got to try to train them. So resistance bands and pulling from an opposite direction can quickly change some of these movement patterns or motor patterns that you tend to see in younger hitters who might not be as strong. He or she might not be strong enough to create clean gathering patterns. So I mean, this is a whole nother conversation, right, Coach? I would say to you, you got to teach them the feel, though. You got to find some type of cueing that can help change that.
Yeah, and the two things I would want to add to that is one of the tips that I got a while ago is that if this is your back foot, you want to feel that weight in that back half of your foot. And a lot of times, especially young hitters, as they transfer that weight on their back foot, they get all on their toes, the ball of their foot, and we lose that heel connection a little bit. Those are some great drills there. And the other thing I would add is that I know that it's difficult if you're a youth coach or a travel ball coach, and based on your time and all the things in life, it can be difficult to get a good physical screening of your hitters, and to learn about their ankle mobility and their hip mobility and those type of things. I would just say that if you have the ability to get either on base U certified or to get some other type of physical screening education done, it can really, really help you to understand that when you assess your hitters, and we can talk about that for hours too, is just, if you can find out the actual root of the problem, that can really help your hitters out a lot too. And again, that takes a little bit more work and some time to learn that part of it. But again, if you're a travel ball coach or hitting coach and you can invest some time in that, it is a worthy investment for you.
Make your job a lot easier for sure.
Yep. Good question from Dan. He's asked, do you believe there's too much emphasis on launch angle, particularly with youth 10 to 14 years old? I'll let you take this one here.
I think there's too many negative connotations with the word launch angle. I think people need to understand that every single ball that's put into play has a launch angle, whether it's positive or negative. I think in the golf world for many, many years, they've kind of not been afraid to kind of tap into some of these definitions and terms that are just explanations more than anything. So when I hear the term launch angle swing, it does, to me personally, doesn't make sense. I think telling a kid that they should focus on line drives is a good way to get good launch angle. And we shouldn't be afraid to say that to that kid. We shouldn't be afraid to tell them that ball that went over the shortstop head was at 9 degrees of launch angle on a Little League field. So I think, your question is a good question. I think it can be misinterpreted and misunderstood depending on the context of how the question is phrased. I think it's good to make sure they know what the launch angle of a line drive or a pop fly is. Maybe you can reverse engineer for that player, and then they can actually get better. When they see the ball going up in the air too high, you can tell them that's a 37-degree launch angle. These kids today are very different. They've learned the game. They have a broader glossary of information and words that they use that just click to them. So we got to be careful. I wouldn't use that. I wouldn't have heard that term, 15 years ago when I was playing. These kids today, they can hear it. So I'm not afraid of it as long as it's explained correctly. There's some benefit to it, I think.
And I think I couldn't say it any better, but I would just say I think that a lot of adults nowadays don't give these kids credit to how well they know things like that. And again, my kids, the world is gamified, from video games to stats. These guys, they know and they understand it. So I'm all for keeping things simple, and I want things to be as simple as possible for our hitters. But I also give them a little credit in understanding what, and if they actually understand what launch angle is, like you talk about, line drive is 9 degrees, and I always tell our hitters, hey, what do you think a line drive over that shortstop's head is? And they'll say 10 degrees, 12 degrees. Awesome, perfect. That's all I want you to think about. If they want to think about hitting line drives over the shortstop's head, awesome. If they want to think 10 to 12 degree launch angle, awesome. Whatever works for that kid to get them excited.
100%.
Let's see. The next question this is a good one from Kai. He says, have you ever had players that overthink in the batter's box? How do you address hitters who just put a lot of pressure on themselves and overthink in the box versus, taking their best swing and letting it go?
I think we all have dealt with players that overthink. I think, again, we have to go back to why it's happening. I think most of the time the reason that someone overthinks is because they want to be perfect. They want to find the best answer or the best solution to their challenges. And also it's a sign that they care. An overthinker cares. And I at the end of the day, when I have someone who's overthinking, I just got to get to their heart. I got to get them to understand that they need to enjoy themselves. Let's not forget that the game of baseball, again, it's a game. It's intended to enjoy, to be able to enjoy yourself. And so I always go back to, and I won't call any names, but there's some players that are on our team that at times overthink. And part of my job is to try to find the right solution with them. So it's very independent on the person. I know as a player myself, what I had to get back to is focusing on the baseball. I think oftentimes when we're overthinking, we're losing sight of the task. The task is to have clarity when the ball is coming in. The task is to get on time, and then the task is to try to create the best bat to ball interaction that you possibly can, so that you can have a consistent outcome up at home plate. So if you have someone that's overthinking, I would say first let's talk about why they're overthinking. They might just care too much. Secondly, I would say let's get them focusing on the task at hand. The task is walking up the home plate with confidence and seeing the ball as clear as you possibly can. And then finally, trying to do something that you can control, which is make good contact. And after that ball leaves the bat, there's nothing else that you can do. The defense is in control at that point. And if God is on your side more times than not, right? If God is on the defender's side, you're in trouble, right?
Amen to that. And I'll just tell parents, it's if you have a son or daughter that's this way, it's a good time to take some self-inventory. Is it something that you're putting on them? Is it the pressure to succeed? Is it self inflicted, or is it something that they know, hey, you know what, my dad's going to give me a long speech in the car on the way home and chew me out if I don't do well here, so I'm feeling this right now. So we can get into that. So the next question, and I'll tell you what, we've got about 5 minutes left, so get your questions in. If you're just tuning in, I'm sitting down with Texas Rangers assistant hitting coach Callix Crabbe, and we are answering your questions live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and you name it. So get your comments in. And again, if you're just tuning in, hit the like button, hit the share button, and let us know where you're tuning in from. We got people in Nashville, Tennessee, you name it. People are tuning in all over the country and the world today, and I appreciate you guys tuning in and getting some great knowledge from Callix, and thanks for being on. Let's see, we'll get a couple more questions and 5 more minutes, and we're out of here. So Kyle asked the question, how much is flexibility connected to a good swing? Does it limit players or no? And Kyle, I'm going to give you my shortest possible answer so we can get to the questions. I always think about things on a spectrum of super hypermobile and super rigid. So like someone who's really big and strong and doesn't move that well, and then you got someone like a Mookie Betts or someone who's really hypermobile on one end of the spectrum, and someone who's big and strong and not very flexible on the other end of the spectrum. In my opinion, I want that flexible person to become less flexible, to be honest with you, to some degree, because it has to do with strength and stability. And so, I think that in my experience, when you take the big, strong guys and you try to take away some of their strength and stability and increase their flexibility in a thing like hitting, it can be troublesome to a degree. I think everyone wants a little bit more flexibility, but I think sometimes we make a mistake of trying to take big strong guys and make them too mobile, and I think sometimes we try to take some hypermobile guys and mess with them. So how much is flexibility connected to a good swing? It really depends on the player and finding what's best for them, in my opinion. Like I said, there's a spectrum, and that's a really short 30-second answer that's probably not super great. But Callix, anything you want to add to how flexibility works in the swing, and does it limit players?
I think you're right on point. I think there's obviously there's two sides to it. There's an injury prevention side, and then there's a performance side. I think if you're looking at it from a performance side, you have to be careful to not put somebody within a certain Rolodex that might be harmful for them. And so I think you have to be flexible in the right spots. So if that means that you're tight in the hips but you're mobile in the T-spine, I'm good with it, right? Like I'm cool with that. So it's just, again, it depends on the individual system that you're dealing with. So yeah, I don't need to add a whole lot to what you said.
That's great. Let's see, we got a couple more here. This is an interesting one. Jeremy asks, how often do you all use basic fundamental movement patterns and simple corrective tips with your pro guys? Are there things you do and use with the high-level guys that you would use with an 8-year-old and vice versa? So basic fundamental movement patterns and simple corrective tips that you use with pro guys that you might also use with an 8-year-old. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think when you look on the PD side, the player development side, I think you can focus in professionally more because you have more time and you have a dedicated staff that's educated that can help these players work to improve some of these patterns that might be bad for them. Oftentimes, some things sadly can't change. I hate saying it that way. Where a person has been so far along doing it that it makes it challenging, and incremental improvement is only possible. I think when you talk about a 8-year-old, it's different because we're dealing with lack of stability. And so in most cases, these kids come in hypermobile because they don't have a lot of muscle on their frames. And so oftentimes you start seeing, inconsistent or sloppy swings that is just purely due to not having time on their side. A player that's 8, when they turn 12, with strength, their swing starts to look cleaner. They start to become more accurate. And I talked about the bat. I think we've been studying with the Rangers, and I know there's some teams that are doing it. We've been studying how weighted, certain weights distributions and bats can affect certain movement patterns, and we found that is happening. We see when you put weight in certain areas in the bat, can have different changes. And so, how much is it about the body, or is it finding an instrument that can help them?
That's great. That's really good. Okay, we got 3 more here. We'll finish today on 3 more. Jesse asks, swinging on a 3-0 pitch for players 15 and under. So I'll tell you what. For me, it really depends on the situation and the score. A lot of things can happen, but I'll tell you what. In my opinion, 3-0 is the best pitch you're going to get all day, even better than 0-0. So it really depends on the hitter. If it's my 3-4 hitter, 2-3-4 hitter who I really trust and I know they make good decisions, I've given the green light several times on 3-0 and it's paid off, and sometimes it hasn't. It's kind of a gamble, but especially at young ages, I like it. Again, like if the bases are loaded and it's a tie game in the last inning with my 9 hitter up, no, they're not swinging 3-0. But any thoughts you want to add on kids or anybody swinging 3-0?
Yeah, I think when you look at the numbers across the professional sector, at least, we see that the 3-0 swinging is extremely beneficial. I think there's been some situations that you remember from this year that were very good outcomes for players when they swung 3-0. But it's also very scenario dependent. I think you're not going to let your 9-0 guy swing. At 15 years old, you just haven't had that many pitches in your database that you can be accurate at a high level with. And so I'm not saying to not do it. I'm just saying make sure that that there might be some downside with the skill level that you're dealing with. Right, the higher up you go, guys know how to swing at better pitches.
Yeah, that's a great. All right, we're down to our final 2. Ryan asks, who are the people that have helped shape your hitting philosophy the most? I think this would be a good question for you, Coach. Who are some of the people that have helped shape your hitting philosophy the most?
It's a pretty big Rolodex, I think. So, like, I think of when I was a kid growing up in St. Thomas, my first coach, Sam Daly, he had always talked about, we know it's not the right word, but if you really use it the right way, it's good. He talked always about like staying in control in the batter's box, making sure that you're balanced up at home plate and balanced in a positive move. So I would say Sam Daly, my first hitting coach, really taught me at a young age. So I would go home and practice correctly. And then as I became a pro, I was very fortunate to have a hitting instructor in the off seasons that did a good job of understanding one style of hitting. He talked about hands, which it's not my style that I teach with, but there are players that need to think about their hands. I hate saying it, just for those out there, and you actually see them swing better when they think about their hands. It doesn't work for me, right? It never did. But I also had a hitting instructor in the minor leagues, Jim Scalen. He was a phenomenal hitting coach. He talked about spine angle when I was playing, when no one talked about it now, about rotating around your spine correctly, staying connected to the core as much as you possibly can as you're going through impact. And then obviously, like, I think of Don Slott. I love Don. I have a good relationship with Don, right view pro. He's someone that from the video portion, I've learned a lot. I would say, I've been fortunate. I know Josh Donaldson a little bit, so I appreciate his ideas. We don't, I don't agree with every single thing that he says, but I believe that he has a really good understanding of how a lot of people's swings work. But there's a lot. Look, I think I have had many years in baseball that have helped me develop some attitudes and opinions and some more direct philosophies. But there's probably too many to mention because experiences are what help shape your thought processes. And I've had a lot of good experiences. Played, I was a good hitter. So I would say that a lot of my failures helped me form a lot of my ideas now in hitting. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
That's great. I appreciate that. And for me, Don Slott's another one for me. Craig Wallenbrock was a big influence on me. And just, again, the list is so long. And I think that, in my opinion, the best guys out there, they follow so many guys and learn from so many guys. I mean, if you follow Callix on Instagram, he's got some great information on there. I kind of pick from all these different guys. Oh, I like that. That's really good information. And you try to as a coach, you do your best to try to learn from as many people as possible, and you build your toolbox to figure out what's best for you. So, all right, Coach, we've gone into overtime, but I want to ask you one last question. It comes from Jeremy. He says, does Coach Crabbe have any social media pages to follow for tips and info? So as you're thinking of that, for me, I'll tell you, again, for me, Callix is a great follow. On Base U is a great one. They share a lot of good information on Twitter in regards to how the body works. I think about also Tommy Johnson, and there's a couple of strength and conditioning guys out there that are really good. Callix, who are some guys maybe on Instagram or someone else that you like to follow? It doesn't have to be even be hitting stuff. Maybe it could be anything else tips wise.
Yeah, so I have to admit I've been pretty poor intentionally about not getting too wound up on social media. Some of you guys at one point, as you know, Coach, I was big on it and then I've kind of pulled back. There's reasons why, but there's a ton of them. I think you mentioned on the issue. I think you should follow a lot of these sites that talk about movement. So I would say follow my group here in Tampa, Diesel Fitness. They do a really good job of just talking about how to improve your movement just through life. I would say Coach Lisle. Right? I've enjoyed. I'm serious. I've enjoyed his social media sites. But there's so many and there's so many that I can't send you directly to one. But I will say this: you need to vet some of those that you do follow. Because we have to remember there's sites that are trying to give you tangible information, and there's some sites that are just trying to gain followers. And the sites that are trying to gain followers, they're combative. They argue. They try to fight against people's philosophies. I would say stay away from those because everything that is educational doesn't mean that it's going to be for you, but it should be good information. Yes. And it should be fighting, right? Like so, and that's kind of why I don't do the social media thing. I want to get with people that matter and they care about like individual success and like growing people. That's the sites that you should gravitate toward. Rather than me tell you to go to a particular site, make sure you find the ones that are about putting out good information and not being combative.
Yeah, And that'd be my biggest tip for anybody following anybody in the Twitter hitting world or anywhere else. Like if all of their content is trying to tear down other people's stuff and being combative, that's not an account to follow. I can tell you that right now. We can all think of a handful of people right now that they go on there and they battle everybody. Look for the people who are positive and who are sharing actually valuable information without tearing down other people, and that would be my best advice. So, Callix, I appreciate you so much being on today. We got lots of great content from you. There were so many good questions out there. Thank you, everybody. Make sure you follow Callix. I said on Instagram. He hasn't posted as much lately, and I understand why. As coaches, the social media world has gotten tough the last couple of years, but. You can find him on Instagram. I always think he has good stuff there, and follow him there. Make sure you follow the Rangers this year and see what they're doing. They got some great young hitters. They got some older veterans too. They're a fun team to watch hit for sure. So, Callix, thanks for being on, and I appreciate you very much, Coach. Anything else you want to add?
No, this was fun. Appreciate you having me. I value you. I appreciate the work that you do, because it's not just changing people's baseball career, but it's changing people's lives.
I appreciate it very much. Thank you. So, hey, everybody, check out thehittingvault.com. Check me out on Coach Lisle, and everybody have a great rest of your Monday. Thanks, everyone.